Welcome. Today we're going to discuss the client contact schematic, some of the protocol for intake, and the things that you need to do once the online form has been filled out, or alternatively when you have no information and you're dealing with a cold phone call or other type of in-person contact where you're going to need to gather significant information. So that you understand, we are talking about information that's going to help the prospective client to understand either from an insurance context how to get recovery, whether that's on the FEMA side or it's on the homeowner side, on the commercial side, the car, the boaters, the other types of insurance that may be relevant. You're also going to deal with issues that arise from those kinds of phone calls, such as people who are going to have problems with their mortgages because they're not living or they can't pay, or now they're in a different property and they're paying twice. You're going to have foreclosure-related issues. You're going to have commercial litigation and other types of issues where people have problems with their leases or problems with getting back into a property that will sort of be ancillary but connected to the main event, the disaster recovery event. And so one of the most important things to understand is how to identify the information that you need and what is the best way to secure that information from the prospect or the client or the person asking for answers to questions. And so what we've done is we've put together a document that you'll be able to sort of move down that chronological aspect and to collect that information that's going to be helpful to you. It's going to allow you to really give a picture to the expert, the adjuster, the lawyer, or other person who's going to be able to further evaluate that question, answer that question, and or provide the legal public adjuster or other type of representation that might be needed in a particular circumstance. It also allows you to effectively communicate with experts on data that they may need. So if I have to send out an engineer and I have the data that's relevant and I know it is a structural problem with a home, then I'm going to be able to intelligently inform that engineer rather than sending that person out on a cold call where they have no idea what the damages are. You need to understand when you're communicating with these types of clients that they are in a very precarious position. Everybody has suffered a significant disaster. There is both a physical context to that and a psychological context. Let's talk about the physical context. The physical context is there has been property damage. They have suffered a large loss primarily to probably the most secure aspect of their life, and that is their home or their business, their rental apartment, and those types of things are very personal to people involved. If you can imagine coming home one day and knowing that you can't live in your home anymore, and you didn't have any planning time, and either important personal items or other things which you think you need, your laptop computer or your home computer is now no longer useful, available, and you have no backups, or your backups are in need of having to get a new system to load them on, you can understand that those are going to be very, very significant physical types of losses which have psychological components to them. You need to understand that you'll be dealing, therefore, with a physical context as well as a psychological context. When we talk about the gestation of these claims, when property owners first get claims, they truly and honestly believe that they're going to be able to make a phone call to their insurance company, and that the insurance company is going to send out a adjuster, investigator, expert immediately, and they're going to receive a check like they see in the television commercials or they see in the marketing materials. They don't see the need for any additional assistance, and they think that if there is a problem with that process, that a simple answer to one question from you will enable them to get the money that they haven't gotten to date. As that time continuum goes on, and they realize that the insurance companies or the government or other types of entities that are required to pay are not paying them with the kind of promptness that they believe is necessary, they will begin to get angry, emotional, desperate. Different types of psychological components come in that we have to recognize and be aware of. When you're out of your home and you have children who believe that their entire stable unit is their home, the only thing they have which makes them comfortable, and you're dealing with separation anxiety and crisis counseling management and other types of things that go beyond just that owner's problem, that family component to the owner's problem, we have to be particularly sensitive to the time frame and the types of emotions you're going to have. You're very likely to deal with people who may be angry. They may take their anger out on you. They may be frustrated. They may be desperate. They may be hopeless. They have different types of emotions depending on what experiences they've had, how much involved they want to be in a claim, and you'll typically find, based on even jurisdictional areas, geographic areas, that certain people are going to be stronger in their opinion and their nature than maybe other sections. So you need to determine where you're going to be making phone calls or receiving phone calls or who you're going to be meeting with to understand the demographic dynamic of that particular individual too. And this backdrop is going to set up the tone for how we're going to talk to the people, what we're going to tolerate, and how we're going to effectively help the insured to best strategize, best secure information, which is going to help them to process their claim. Some of the information you will give will be answers to questions that will then enable them to finish the claim on their own. We always try to encourage insureds that they can do this claim on their own. They do not have to have a public adjuster or lawyer or other expert. But once we explain to them the process of what they need, it is highly likely that they are going to need some sort of supplemental assistance, whether that be in the form of an expert, a lawyer, adjuster, or some combination thereof. So these questions and this information you're going to be securing, whether the information is done from already an active database, that is a questionnaire or something online, a pro-law form, something, or whether you're going to be getting that from a situation where you have no information, somebody can't get to a computer, they went to a town meeting, they met with someone who gave them some information that made them believe that Storm Help Team might be able to assist them. Either situation, you're going to be dealing with the same dynamic of person. So, why is it important to understand that? Because there's a level of patience that's going to be needed in these situations. You are going to have people who may even call you, try to get one answer to a question, say, I don't need you anymore, hang up, go out and try to process their claim, realize they are grossly unsuccessful, think it is either their fault or somebody else's fault, and then be calling you back. So we are not put off by whether somebody wants some information and not all the information, or with the reality that they may think they can do this claim on their own. People will find, and it has been my extraordinary experience and other people's extraordinary experience with this amount of claims, to understand that there are going to be tens of thousands of lawsuits needed to be filed to get money. And so that these people have to understand that not all the claims, not even most of the claims, will be resolved by this typical, I called on the phone, the adjuster comes out, and they say, you're absolutely right, you have $86,406.12 of damage. So if you understand that dynamic, you understand that it's going to be almost unbelievable for the people on the phone to think that without your additional information, they can't resolve this on their own. It's going to be incredulous to them that an insurance company will not pay a claim that seems like it's obvious to them. It will be angering to them to have an adjuster come out and to refuse to take pictures from them, or to stand and not go through the entire property and to summarily say, you don't have any homeowners coverage because this is a flood, or you don't have any flood coverage because this is sewage, or you don't have any FEMA coverage because you have insurance coverage, or you don't have any flood or homeowners because neither of those events caused your damage. Regardless of how silly, improper, illogical, unfair that may seem. Now, we must understand at the same time that balancing mechanism is that if you do not have specific coverage for the peril, that is, for the event that's causing the harm, there may be every justification for that insurance company, government, or other entity to deny you coverage, even though the insured may tell you, I thought I had that coverage. They told me that I had coverage. We'll talk later about who they are and what remedies they might have if somebody has told them they have coverage that they don't have, or has misgiven them coverage. We have properties here that may be a co-op or a shared property. We have a firewall and it's all on one piece or one parcel, and it's insured, and the insurance company is saying, yeah, you can't have two properties insured on the same property, and you have this kind of disinformation of, is that true? And if it's not, why didn't the insurance agent tell me? And so we're going to have to deal with those types of questions that may not necessarily have an answer that says you have coverage from the insurance company. It may be an answer that says we need to look at the insurance agent or the representatives who have made perhaps inaccurate representations, or we need to look and drill down, dive down into what the client's understanding is to understand that they may not have been misinformed. They may really either be, one, just not understanding what was told to them, or two, maybe fudging a little bit in order to maximize their ability to get claims. You have to understand that from past storms, there have been an enormous amount of fraudulent claims made. The determination and the definition of what a fraudulent claim is not what you conventionally understand that term to mean. You have to understand that, for example, if somebody fails to document a claim properly or says that they have more damage because they think they have more damage, even though they can't support it, that may be deemed a fraudulent claim, even though there's not the kind of malice that you understand with Ponzi schemes and other types of things that have this intentional, malicious, conspiratorial, premeditated type of context to them. You know, in fraudulent claims, you might overstate something thinking that you're not overstating it, but you're not properly looking at the policy and it's telling you there's a certain value and you're claiming more, and that can be deemed fraudulent. So when you talk about fraudulent claims, the insurance company has faced hundreds of thousands, millions of claims that are fraudulent. What has happened is that the insurance companies, governments, and other people have sometimes leveraged that concept of there's a lot of fraudulent claims to summarily deny or to delay in their processing using the safe harbor or auspices of, well, it could be a fraudulent claim. You know, we had a lot of fraudulent claims. Then adding a new dynamic to the psychological situation of the insured who says they're calling me a fraud. That is horrible. I am not a fraudster. And they have a different level of anger directed at the insurance entity or other paying organization that you'll have to deal with in a dynamic. And a dynamic that you may need to explain and understand, while this is very personal, it's not personal. In the sense that if an insurance company may be denying a claim based on what they say might be fraud, that they might be doing this to 500 others, 5,000 others, even though it is really either one, not truly fraudulent, two, intentionally trying not to pay you claims, or three, in an understanding of what they deem as fraudulent, but the individual insurer does not consider that. It's important to understand these dynamics beforehand, because if you understand the landscape, you understand the possibilities, you understand the positions of the varying parties, you're going to be able to comfortably talk to that insured, prospective insured, renter, co-op, condo, commercial owner, and understand, hey, there are different dynamics at play here, which may either justify you to be as angry as you are, or may not justify you to be as angry as you are. That doesn't mean that you're trying to argue, debate, or trying to devalue the emotions people feel, but sometimes the person on the other end of the phone or sitting across the table from you may need more of an education to understand why the insurance company is or is not doing something that may not make sense to them at first, but may ultimately make sense. And let me give you some simple examples. Let's suppose that you are claiming you have structural damage to property. Let's say that you think there are cracks in your walls, or you're not sure, but you think your house has moved, or your windows don't open properly, even though they clearly function, they're not broken, or your doors don't seem to work the same way, however subtle that is, and you want to make a claim, and you take pictures of cracks and other things, and you send them to the insurance company, or to the government, or to FEMA, or to other entities that you believe will pay you, and they say, even though you had your public adjuster go out there, or you had your general contractor go out there, or you went out there, or your best friend Bob went out there who, knows everything there is to know, and you have this great estimate written down that looks, documentary in nature, and you have pictures, and the insurance company says, we're not paying you a dime. And they view that as, you are defrauding me. They view that as, that is incomprehensible, unbelievable, ridiculous, that is unfair, malicious, bad faith, etc., etc. And really what the insurance company is saying, whether they describe it or not, is we just need some science. We just need somebody to go out there like an engineer and say, based on professional standards, this type of crack is a type of crack caused by movement of the building, caused by large wind, caused by the weight of water. And the insurance company may not be disclosing that, but they may be summarily denying a claim. I see this often in situations where FEMA will tell you, the government will tell you, I'm sorry, your claim is denied, summarily. Yeah, but I have housing needs. I have other housing needs, sometimes called other needs assistance. I need that. They say, well, you have insurance coverage, so your claim is denied. And what does the insured think immediately? FEMA has permanently denied my claim. That is the most horrible thing in the world. They are terrible people. And really, all the government or FEMA is saying is that you need to understand that under the law, your insurance is primary. You must first seek that coverage if you've represented you have insurance. And then you can come back to us for money if you don't get claims. So denied, the word, doesn't mean denied. How in the Lord's name could you know that that's what that means? How would anybody know unless you had substantial experience with tens of thousands of claims and you even understood what FEMA was saying wasn't even right? Because some agent, some representatives might say, you have no claim. And you think that means I really have no claim. And what it really means is that I'm pushing the hold button and the light on the phone is blinking. I'm putting you on hold. I'll be right back with you, sir. So that might be something where it has an insured very angry, thinking that the most horrible thing in the world has happened. They're being screwed. They're being denied. And in reality, when you educate them and say, no. You might have full coverage. You might get all the money you need from FEMA. You just can't get it till you exhaust your insurance. The insurance company says, I'm sorry, we won't pay that for a valid reason. So if you understand that, you understand some of these suggestions, you'll understand the dynamic of when people are screaming on the phone, blaming you, blaming other people, upset, angry, hopeless, frustrated, disturbed, that we need to understand where that's coming from so that in the context of gathering information and answering questions, we're going to be answering questions that are going to be more productively helpful to getting that person in the right frame of mind. It is important to understand that since you are dealing with people who don't have money and need it, may not be living in their homes, and may have an array of venting needs, that is the need to tell you the horrible stories they have and how bad it is, what your job is, what your skill set is, how you can help the people most. How I personally help the people is I focus people on what they can get. I focus people on how to get money, how to get their house fixed, what opportunities there are, not how bad people are. When I talk in town meetings and other places, I know what they feel. I have lived through massive storms, Category 5 storms, having no power for weeks, having no ability to get gas, all the things which they're suffering, the insurance company refusing to pay. Even though I'm one of the foremost people in the country, that insurance company for my property is saying, I'm not paying you, or I'm not paying you what you want. So you have to understand that when you have that situation, you have to be able to absorb that and say, how do I redirect? How in the context of gathering information can I focus the caller or the person that I'm talking to, in person or otherwise, into let's try to find a way to help you. So you have to initiate your conversation in a way that's going to productively show them that this is about opportunities. This is about money. This is about helping you. I am not going to take away from the fact that you may be angry. I'm angry too. We've actually handled more claims than just your claim. We understand. But that if we focus today, if we focus over the next many times I'm going to speak with you, meet with you, and otherwise, we are going to get a more productive resolution. Armed with that, armed with some understanding of that landscape, we can now jump into, okay, what do we say? How do we help the person on the other line or the person I'm meeting with in person, the person I'm talking to through email, whatever way I'm making contact? Well, you need to start with a greeting. You need to start with greeting them in a way that shows them that, we are an organization, this particular organization, that is helping them. The Storm Help Team is here to help you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Scott Major. My name is Jane Doe. I have the privilege of working with a wonderful organization like stormhelpteam.org. Our job is to find ways to resolve your problems, to educate you, to give you information which will enable you to get money, enable you to get back into your home, enable your business to return and function, to recover monies which you have suffered as a result of that property damage loss, to recover monies that you suffered as a result of not being able to employ your employees, not being able to make payroll, not being able to continue your business, or to have the disruption compensated in a way that helps you. Okay? We are here as a resource. So I need to focus that individual for your benefit and theirs on we are here about opportunities. So let me begin by telling you that I'm going to be asking you some questions. I'm going to be gathering some information, but you can help me by focusing on giving me the information which will enable me to get you money. Enable the information to make you feel better about the possibilities. To give you the information that will enable you to understand that you have an opportunity here. They will say yes. Or you will ask them, do you understand what I'm saying? And you can even sort of deflect some of the issues relating to, let me vent and tell you why my legislator is the worst human being in the world, or why my insurance company's jerks, and say, listen, I am not taking away from your ability, your feelings, your needs to vent that anger, to think for a moment that I am not sensitive to your need. I want you to know that I am here, and the best way I can help you is to educate you and to get information so that we can give you the best kinds of strategies that will gain you money. If you understand this dynamic, then you will frame that person. I will tell you, having done many speeches, many presentations, and even most recent, some in New York, where I was the speaker after they booed and cussed off loudly the legislator before me. You couldn't have a more angry room. You couldn't have a more intolerant room. You couldn't have a room that would be more quick to kick me out, to walk out of the room than that room was. And when I finished the speech, they gave me a standing ovation. What does that mean? It's not about testimonializing. It's about framing. So when you talk to people, make sure you remember that when they're venting, you need to refocus them at all times towards, that's horrible, and there may be times when you need to listen, but please let me help you by getting this information in a way that I can give you answers to the very problems you feel right now. And while I have no problem listening to you speak for 5 or 10 minutes or an hour on how terrible that insurance company is, how bad that adjuster is, how mean-spirited the people are on the phone, how uncooperative they are, I want to tell you that if you want me to best help you, if you want us to take the vast amount of experience we have and share that with you in a way that will be productive, what I really need from you is for you to think about, to channel that energy towards giving me every piece of information that you think will be useful. Every piece of information that you think will best enable us to answer your questions. If you understand this dynamic and you can get a commitment from that person, either in person, on the phone, by email, you start to see that now we're in a position where now we can dive in and get answers, and they're focused not on every time you ask them what the representatives say, them going off on a diatribe about how angry they are. Rather, they're going to be saying, the more information I give this person, the sooner I'm going to get money, the more money I'm going to get. So understand that out of the box. You want to get a commitment from the person you're speaking to that they understand that what today's discussion, what next week's discussion is going to be about is about getting them money, about bettering their life, about providing a resource that will make them more educated, therefore more confident about their ability to secure the type of relief they're asking for. I will bet you that 99% will agree to that commitment. 99% will say, I get it. But you must do that early in your conversation. Okay? You must do that if you're sitting across from the table with them with the kind of conviction that I'm telling you now, so that they understand that that's what you really believe. Once you do that, we can now start talking about, okay, what kind of information is the best information to give? If you have an online questionnaire and you already have data, then it would be very important for you to review that data before meeting them in person, speaking to them on the phone, talking to them through Skype or email or other types of things. Why? Because you can add that to your framing. My name is Jane Doe. I'm here on behalf of stormhelpteam.org. We're an organization dedicated to helping you get the most money the quickest. Let me just tell you that I'm going to be here along the entire time of your stay with us, the entire time of your processing of the claim. And I want to tell you that let me start by saying that I appreciate what you've been through. Many people, including myself, have been through mass hurricanes and understand exactly the type of damages. What I'm here to do is to help you to secure money, to get information. And so if you can work with me, if you'd be kind enough to commit to me that you'll give me information and focus with me on how we can get data, then I make a commitment to you, I'll get you the education. In your case, I see from looking at that questionnaire that you have a homeowner's claim. Let's talk about getting information that's going to help you with the homeowner's claim. I see that you have a flood claim and a homeowner's claim. Let's focus on the data that I need from you in order to give you the best advice on how to get the most money on both your homeowners and your flood claim. See what I've done? I'm taking their data and I'm interjecting it and making it personal after I've framed them that I understand. Any human being who breathes is going to want that type of approach and is going to need that focusing. Then I can start with, okay, what is it that I'm going to do to help them? Well, in order to know what I'm going to do, I need to know what they want. So one of my early questions, assuming, of course, that we already know that these people are subject to a disaster, subject to an actual valid insurance claim, is, what do you want? What do you want? Mrs. Thompson, it's a pleasure speaking with you. Tell me exactly what kind of relief you think you're asking for. And that kind of relief can be categorized in different ways. If you notice, I didn't say, how much money are you looking for? I said, what kind of relief? Why is that important? Because I first want to know what kind of relief they're looking for. If they say, I want $200,000, and you find out that they have no insurance and they're only qualifying for FEMA housing relief, they're not getting $200,000. You don't want to make promises you can't keep. So I first want to categorize. What kind of relief do you have? Do you want? Do you want, and they'll say things like, I really need to get homeowners money. I have a flood, and I need to get money from my flood insurance. I have a bunch of different insurance policies. I don't know what to do. I was told by FEMA that I'm not going to get money, and I need FEMA money because I don't have insurance coverage. So what have I done? I have started to frame out, okay, what food group am I talking about? And as you'll learn from me and other speakers, a flood claim might have different parts to it, different needs to it, different types of coverage, different types of caps than a homeowner's policy. What triggers the coverage for a flood policy, as we know, is different than what triggers the coverage for a homeowner's or a flood or FEMA. Some of it has overlap, but much of it is distinct, and that's why there are separate policies. So the first question I want to ask is, what kind of relief do you need? You may find that somebody fills out an online questionnaire or sends you an online questionnaire, and their question is about building permits. The question is about why their legislator won't respond to them. The question is why it is that they can't get a licensed general contractor that's worth their salt out to their property. If you listen to those kinds of questions, you realize those questions are less about what kind of relief in an insurance policy they have, and more about how do I get some other organization, some other person to do something, to listen to me. You might get questions that sound like insurance questions, but are really not necessarily insurance questions. The city told me I'm entitled to money to fix my home. The city is telling me, the county is telling me they're going to fix this sewage. I need you to help me get that. Okay? Now, there may be circumstances under which litigation or a lawyer might be useful in that situation, such as in Baldwin or other places where you found a sewage pipe broke caused by the negligence of a city or county organization, which then resulted in sewage filling up properties. But usually that will be in the minority. That will be the rarity. That sounds like a value dollar question, but it's really about, well, we need to contact your city councilman, your city assemblyman, your city or county legislator, because they will be able to tell you each and every program. Now, to the extent that stormhelpteam.org has those resources available at its ready on the site, you will be able to share those resources and say, if you need to talk about anything that occurs in Baldwin, you can contact Councilman so-and-so at X address, at X phone number. But until that time, that might sound like an insurance question. It's more a question that needs to be helpfully directed to somebody. And whenever you direct them to someone, you always say, if you're not satisfied with that answer, please contact us back. We're not getting rid of you. We're not ending our conversation. We're merely giving you the best advice to maximize your ability to get relief. So I need to find out what food group they're in. Once I find out what food group they're in, I'm able to move to now sort of focus in on how can I specifically help them, assuming that I'm not referring this to some other authority. As a side note, on the documentation that is provided with this video, it complements and tracks what I am saying now. It's giving you examples of how to process that claim, and on the first 2 or 3 pages, you will see that kind of information. Once they have given you the category, now I need to find out, okay, well, who's helping you? Is it you? Is it you and your spouse? Did you hire a public adjuster? Has an engineer already come out to your property? I need to figure out what it is that they have done in terms of getting help. I'm not asking them whether they physically inspected the property. I'm asking, who am I talking to? Am I talking to you? Do I need to have your spouse, significant other on the phone because we're going to talk together where I can get the most information, or maybe the husband or wife remembers something, whether the significant others remember something, and so having both people on the phone, they might say, oh yeah, Bob, do you remember that too? Is it something where they've said they've gotten another expert, they've hired a public adjuster, where I might need to get data from them as to what they've done outside the presence of the insured? That might tell us that a claim's already been resolved, or that it's in form, or that they've done an estimate, or what have you. Did they hire an engineer or an expert that maybe didn't necessarily give them an insurance claim, but gave them a repair, or gave them a report, or gave them data? I'm shrimp netting. I'm throwing out the big net. I want to capture the shrimp in and pull out the lobster, or to know which is the lobster and which is the shrimp. So I want to make sure I know, okay, I understand you have a homeowner's claim. I understand that you have some sort of claim relating to the structural damage of your property. I understand that you have something with flood. And I understand that there is no one helping you, or the following people helping you. So I either might want them on the phone too. I might want to talk to them afterward. I might need to find out more information about what data they've done in terms of collection, creation, modification, so that I can get a better picture of what they might know. Somebody might say, oh, yes, I have a homeowner's claim, and I need to get relief, but I hired a public adjuster, and I think he's getting a check in a week. If I didn't ask him they had a public adjuster, you might think you're working up a claim that's already been settled. They're already paying another person. You're already wasting your time because they've already got that in motion, and what they really need is some comfort from you to know that that public adjuster will probably see that job through. Or they need to know to call us back if you have gotten your check and it's not sufficient. Or they need to know, do I need additional assistance on top of the public adjuster, where you want to contact that public adjuster and help them. So knowing the and who's helping with that food group is important. And you'll see in your materials that you have that sort of thing. Once I've done that, now I want to ask them how much money you're seeking. Because now I know what food group I'm in. I'm seeking $500,000 on a national flood policy, which they don't know has a limit of $250,000, which they don't know has a limit of $100,000. You may think they have a $500,000 claim. If you haven't food grouped that first, if you haven't found out if they got none of the money first, you may not know that their damage claim is not really what they think it is. That's why this order is so helpful. You're screening down, but you're also educating, and you're helping the consumer, the insured, the owner, to better understand what they need to be thinking about. So I want to know, what specific damages are you looking for? What does that mean? Well, confirming specific damages is, okay, let's start with the broad. What are you telling me? How much money do you want? What kinds of damages make up that money? If you ask somebody what kind of damages they want, it may tell you information that's going to help you to know how much value. If somebody says, I lost my clothes, the likelihood of them telling you they have $1 million claim is probably lower than if they say, my building moved, and now there's a red tag on my door saying I can't live in my premises. That's likely not to be a $5,000 claim. So sometimes by asking them first, not how much, but what kinds of damages do they have within that food group of homeowners or flood or whatever, I might be able to tell them. If they say that all of my damages are relating to contents and they had a flood and you know there is no flood coverage for contents, you may be dealing with an issue where they need to go talk to FEMA. So you see, by starting with the food group, drilling down to, okay, now I understand where you are at, now I understand who's helping you, so I understand the context, and now I understand what kinds of damages there are. Then I can refine it and say, okay, what's the number? So by moving in that order, you will see that you will most effectively accomplish that. Now again, throughout this entire discussion, recognize that you may have an online questionnaire. You may have a fax questionnaire. You may have talked to that client, and you may have a lot of this data already. So instead you may be saying, I see that your form says that you have listed that you lost 2 computers and you lost 4 pairs of shoes. In that situation, when you have data, I want you to always remember what is called the exhaustion technique. And that is the technique that says, I'm going to take what somebody tells me and I'm going to exhaust their memory base. Sir or Mrs. Jones, I notice in your information you provided that you listed that 2 suits were lost and 2 computers were lost. Tell me what else you lost. Now, the framing is important. I don't want to say, did you lose anything else? If you're the listener, you might think, I need to say no, because otherwise you're going to think that I'm an idiot and forgot things. I might feel defensive. If you say, tell me what else you lost, or what else did you lose, that triggers somebody to say, let me think for a moment, and realize whether or not I left everything out. Or maybe they're telling me I need to open my mind. And you will find that everyone, including you, doesn't remember everything. You never do. Think about the last phone conversation you had with anyone. Can you tell me word for word what happened? If I asked you the last time you ate to explain to me how you got the food, who cooked it, how long it took to cook, what were the minutes amount, how did it taste, how did it differentiate from other types of taste, what exactly food did you put in, even if you made it, you'd really have to roll your eyes up and think, well, let me think about that. So you're giving this person in an unjudgmental, non-judgmental way a way to give you more information. Because this is about information. The more you ask this information, the more you inquire about the information, again, the better we're going to be able to serve them. The better any organization in this type of position will be able to serve them. So it's important to make sure that when you have questionnaires and you have information, to constantly be saying, I'm confirming what you have. What else do you think fits in that category? Or fill in the blanks. What else do you think should go under the category of contents? What else do you think should go under the category of computers? What else do you think should go under the category of what's in your house, the contents? If they say, I'm not sure, I don't know, you could say, well, tell me everything that's damaged then, and let us determine that. Well, I actually lost a toaster oven, but I really didn't think it was a big deal because I have another one. Well, let me write that down. So I'm using the exhausting technique, and then I use the repetition technique, or the reframing technique. Thank you. I see that you told me that you have 2 suits, 2 computers, and the toaster. What else do you remember? So now I'm repeating and using the exhaustion technique. And the last form of extracting the most information to help them is the resource technique. You've indicated that all you can recall is the 2 suits, the 2 computers, and the toaster. And you indicated that that's what you can remember right now is all the things that were damaged. Who else can help me? Who else do you think can help remember that? Oh, my husband. Oh, my wife. Oh, my son. Okay. You want to hold on? You want to put them on? You want to call me back? So I've used an exhaustion technique. Ask them everything. I've used a repetition or reframing. I'm going to repeat and then say what else. And I've used a resource technique. Okay, I realize I have everything. Who else knows? So when I use those types of techniques, exhaustion, repetition, resource, ERR, what I'm doing is I'm maximizing my ability to help that person by getting as much information as I can. And you will find that you might have to do this over a period of time. And whether we are taking a deposition and training top lawyers on how to extract information, or we are talking to our friends to learn more about what happened that day, or we are talking to a prospective insured, an existing insured, a prospective client, I want to use what's going to give me the most information so I can help them the most. Remember, all along the process, if you get questions which attack what you're doing, why are you asking me all this information? Why don't you just do this? Why don't you just come to my house? Whatever. You just go back to your safe harbor of, I'm trying to help you. We want to give you the best service. The best way to do that is to understand the full picture. I'm really sorry, but as you know, I don't live in your house or I'm not in your business, so I don't know what you know. You know way more than me, and I'm thank you for telling me all the stuff you have, but I'm using this type of questioning to help me to help you in the best way. Most people will understand that you're trying to be helpful. If you don't want to answer any question, just tell me and we'll move on. I just wanted to let you know that I don't want to do you a disservice So I'm going to ask the questions until you tell me not to ask them, because I need to get the most information to help you. And what you think may not be important may be vitally important. If you tell me that you don't think that because your window isn't broken, that it's not damaged, and I never ask you whether or not it's hard to open or close it, you may never tell me that problem, and I may not be able to help you to get brand new windows because the structure moved, or because the window's defective, or because under the code, under the guidelines set out by law or policy or regulation, you're entitled to some more money. You see the dynamic of what we're doing. Once I've gathered that kind of information that we've talked about, I am now ready to move forward into talking about that information. What kinds of information am I going to want to talk about? Well, what I want is documentary evidence. When I'm referring to documentary evidence, what I mean is anything that is printed, visual, anything that could be put on a piece of paper or some format or transcribed to a format. So that means both things like photographs, things like letters and correspondence, plans, reports, estimates, testing, that kind of documentary stuff, if you will, is going to be the linchpin, the most important part of how I maximize recovery. Think about it simply. If you don't have a picture of the cracked wall and you're telling the insurance company that you have structural damage, how does the insurance company know that you have the damage that you truly believe in, maybe you truly see? So if you want to frame the person you're speaking to, you can say, I want to move next to documentary evidence. And what I mean by that is I want to learn more about the photographs, the videos, the correspondence, the interactions you've had since the day of the storm, since before the storm, since whatever time period we're talking about, through today. Let's start with photographs. Let's start with video. Let's start with photographic support. Videographic support. However you feel you're most comfortable in articulating that. Picture's worth 1,000 words. You want to have every imaginable picture of every kind of damage. So what do I need to do? Use the same technique. I want shrimp netting. I want to go out and say, okay, who took the pictures? Bob took the pictures. Aside from Bob, who else took pictures? I'm using the same exhaustion, reframing or reiteration, resource technique. Okay, now I know all the people who took pictures or took video. Okay, now let's go back and let's talk about the pictures. So only you took pictures. Okay, let me make sure that I have exhausted their resource base. What do I mean by that? Maybe they're not thinking about the adjuster for the insurance company. So I might ask them, did anybody come out to your property and take any pictures or do any video? After I've gone through and given them a chance to tell me, because they might already say in my questioning about who took pictures that are representative from the insurance company or multiple insurance companies, and then I identify each one of them. But if they don't, I want to remind them that photographic evidence includes anybody else's stuff, anybody else's video. When I get that, I then start looking at, okay, how many pictures were taken? I don't know. Give me a guess. Sometimes in documentation you receive, they might tell you the number. So I see you've taken 45 photographs. What other photographs did you take? Well, I took some photographs from a camera, but we're not using those. Okay, well, those I need. So I want to make sure when they say 45 that they mean that is every single photograph, even the ones they think are blurry or didn't come out. So you see how in each technique I am making sure I get that data. Now, you may have a situation where all the things we're talking about are already documented, so your questioning is much shorter, thinner, faster. But you need this information so that you can best educate them on what happens. If they said, I took pictures, and you say how many, and they say 45, and we start to talk about, well, where are those pictures, and what did they depict? And they tell you, and when you get done, you realize that they've told you that they have clothing and toaster damage, but they took no pictures of the clothing and poster damage because they thought when you said pictures, you meant like house. You meant the rings that are around where the floodwater is. If you see, everything is inextricably tied and neatly tied to make it easy for you to help them and easy for them to help themselves. So, I want to go through and get photograph or videographic evidence of all kinds. Sometimes they can upload it if they're using an online accessory that Storm Help Team or another organization provides. What's most important is that you find a way to get them. Perhaps there will be emailing you those pictures. Whatever the protocol, you want to get your hands on those pictures. If they're in digital format, which most everything is now, it becomes easier to email. If they don't know how to do it, they can bring you a disk. If they don't know how to do that, they can get the pictures printed. There are differing ways to secure the information that is related to photographic or videographic evidence. As you learned, we talked about itemizing and actually putting the names on them, or if they cannot do so, printing it out and writing on there. But you want to constantly remember that they have the largest set of information. This is not a situation where it is a legal case or it is some sort of product sale where you have the large set of information and all you need is their signature or a couple of facts. This type of organization, in its philanthropic nature, is designed to educate, is designed to empower. And that can only be done by getting all the information that they have lived, seen, felt, heard into this dynamic. And so the photographs are very important in getting a picture, literally, of what is going on. Now, some people may have videos, and the same sort of information is important. And if people haven't done videos, you can suggest to them, if you have a video, or if you have a phone that has a video function, why don't you walk around the home to where the same places you took pictures and more, and just talk. I am standing here, and if you notice, I'm taking a picture right now of the faucet in the master bathroom, and you see it's leaking. There is no formalized way, Mrs. Jones, to do this, so you don't have to worry about whether it's broken up, whether it's jiggling, whether you do a good job. The concept is we are trying to make a picture, a moment in time that shows the damages. Understand, more is more here. When I'm in my presentations, when I'm doing my educational sessions, I say the first thing to do is to take photographs. The second thing to do is to take more photographs. The third thing to do is to take even more photographs. Because you need different types of photographs to document the way that picture looks. Maybe the light wasn't good. Maybe you were too close. Maybe you were too far. Maybe it's something that you think is good, maybe better in a close-up. The concept being that we are trying to get the best, quote, picture of the damages. So in your communications, while you may have some photographs or video uploaded or provided to you, you want to make sure you have all of that information and that the people who you're serving if they haven't gotten that they can still create it. So it's important to start in the documentary basis with, I need to get a picture as if I am looking at your home now. Now, if they haven't done that, if they don't know how to do it, if they don't wish to do it, then you can supply them with someone who will go out there. You can say, well, if you decide to hire a public adjuster, that public adjuster will go out tomorrow and take photographs for you. If you hire a lawyer, that lawyer will hire an appropriate person to go out and take pictures for you. That will be the minority of cases, because most people, when you get past day 1, day 5, day 10, they are already making an emergency claim to FEMA, and so they already would have taken pictures to show FEMA. But this is just a way for you to get more pictures, get a better picture of what's going on with the damages. Another form of documentary evidence is what is written. What has the insurance company, FEMA, any organization written you, city, county, to document whatever representations are being made? If you've looked on information you have been provided and it shows you that they have a homeowner's insurance policy, you need to make sure that you have a letter that says what the claim number is. Because the claim number is the operating instrument, not necessarily the name that identifies for that insurance company the processing of the claim. So what you might call the client or the case or the matter, the insurance company is generally referring to it as the claim number. There may or may not be a separate insured or customer number, but the claim number is what's going to be discussed. If you see a homeowner's and a flood policy and a commercial policy, you know you need to see 3 different claim numbers. You know you need to see letters on each of the insurance policies that they may be seeking relief for. Many people don't understand that they might have umbrella coverage or excess coverage, auto coverage or boat coverage, that they don't realize may provide them coverage for things that sound like they're related to the flood, sound like they're related to the home. That is why when you did your original food categories, you wanted to make sure you knew all the policies have. That is why most of the online questionnaires that you might receive ask them to list each and every policy they have. And why, if you see the form and you see that they have listed flood coverage, you will use the same exhaustion technique. What other coverage besides flood do you have? It's always what else? It's never do you. The idea is to promote thought. For the thousands and thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of claims that the teams of experts who do this have seen, you never get all the information. Not through the intentional fault of the person communicating, but through their lack of remembering each and every detail. Remembering that when you're trying to help them, you are both providing a service to maximize their money, but you are taking away their pain. You are taking away the aggravation that they have right now. If you watch on television after any disaster, take New York or one of the other major disasters, you will find that there will always be a bunch of people, when they put the mic up to them, that will say, "This has become my life. All I do is this claim. All I do is spend hours and hours every day on the phone or with the representatives. I want to take that pain away. We want to take that pain away. Our job is to make your life easier, is to allow you to return to those things which you love. Your job, your family, your hobbies. So that dynamic is always interwoven into any and all communications you have. That documentary evidence that we talked about, in addition to the actual letter of the claim form, is what has happened from the day of the event, the storm, the tornado, the hurricane, the hailstorm, the blizzard, the flood, the earthquake, the fire, the vandalism. What has happened physically? So when they first faced the event, did they pick up a phone and call the insurance company? Did they call their insurance agent? Did they call their mother? Did they call their friend next door? Who did they call? Who are all the people they called? Because they may have documentation to or from them. Now, if you notice, we're asking first for who they called and second for who they wrote. Because most people call or email before they write separate correspondence and put a postage stamp on it. So statements like, let's talk about who you called or emailed. Sometimes you'll find it effective in each category to frame the listener, to frame the person in front of you. Now let's talk about the things you did, such as making phone calls or writing emails or sending letters. Okay, now I'm framing them to what I'm going to talk about. The next thing we're going to talk about is, let's start with the day of the storm, the day after the storm. What did you do first? Now, at this point in time, I am not necessarily looking for a 1-hour chronology orally of what happened, but I am triggering the mind to start with, let's hearken back to, how did this get started? What did I do? And they're going to roll their eyes and think, if they're on the phone, or they're going to look up and say, let me think, or maybe they've written down. The first thing I did was call my mother. If you want to show framing and you want to open their horizons, you might say, I don't care who you called or emailed. It could be your sister or the insurance company, but I'd like to start with who you called. Who they called will help you to understand two things. One, who's their go-to person? Two, what is the subset of the people or entities they're calling? And if you notice, there's a reason why that order is that way. Because they might have called their sister or their mother, and now you have another resource of information that their best friend, their relative has, that you might be able to secure more information. And the mother you speak to, and she says, oh yeah, and you know what? I came down and took pictures. Or you know what? What happened was I called the insurance company. Or I told them, or they said to me that all of their clothing was ruined. Go-to people get intimate details. I talk a lot about cultures. And I say that if you are speaking to someone who has their first language as Spanish, even though they speak great English, you should speak to them in Spanish. The reason being is, if they're more comfortable in their language, they will be more open. They also will be able to express themselves in ways that they might not be able to express themselves in a second or third or fourth language. The same thing works here. Who they're talking to may be an outlet for additional information, may end up determining to be a support mechanism. I call the mother and say, here's how I need your help too. I need you to help keep your son, your daughter, your mother, your father, your best friend focused on, we want to help them. We want to take away the aggravation. So keep reminding them that the more they remember, they should push that to us. Because we really want to help your son, your daughter, your best friend, your uncle, your client. Another way of reiterating the genuineness of what this cause is about, the philanthropic nature of, fundamentally and foremost, we're trying to help people. You have data in some of your materials that will show you sample questions on how to ask for that kind of information. I will reiterate that you want to use the same sorts of information gathering tools that you used earlier. And let me give you an example of a series of questions you might ask if you were asking about a phone call, so that you would understand that you need to open your mind. What do I mean by that? Well, Mrs. Jones, who did you first call? I called the insurance company for my homeowner's policy. So that's the Travelers, correct? Yes, it is. Tell me the first words that they uttered. Did they say hello? Did they say, hi, how can I help you? Did they say, good morning? Did they say, we're the claims department? No, I called them and they said they had to transfer me. Did they tell you what department they were transferring you to? Did they tell you who they were? Why does that help? Because what I want to start doing is training the person that I need every single piece of details. It's called baby steps, rather than jumping to, and when do they open your claim? Because what people say is very important. What we hear is often different than what they say. If I asked you to recollect the last conversation you had with someone you love, you would tell me the core details. Well, we talked about the trip we went on, and we talked about what we're doing tonight. They might not say, we talked about the exact kind of pizza sauce that I'm going to be picking up, and in what volume I have that, which might yield information on what they're really thinking about. So it's important for you to start with that process. If you want to preface it, as we've talked before, you might want to say, I'm going to be asking you a series of questions that may be very slow in what I ask, or they may be very, very distinct. They may be very complicated. They may be very simple. They may be very, whatever language you want to use to illustrate that I'm going to be asking you a significant number of questions. Please trust with me that I'm doing this for a reason to help you. Okay, you spoke to the insurance agent. What did they say to you? What did you say to them? Then what did you say? Then what did they say? Then what did you say? What else? What else? What else? Oh, so I see you said this, 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 and this. What else did you say? I see they said this, 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 and this. What else did they say? I'm using the shrimp netting. I'm using that, technique of I'm trying to extract information from them and get the exhaustion of all the information. I'm using the repetitiveness and reframing. And then I'm saying at the end, who else might know about that conversation? Who else did you speak to about that conversation? Who else was on the phone? Again, all we're trying to do is to gather the most information with the least amount of stress. But if you use the same sorts of techniques and you take your time, you are going to be able to help that client, that prospect, much more than if you just make assumptions about things. When I do training in large groups of people, and I'm talking about communication skills, relationship skills, success skills, I hand out some questions. Those questions are to be answered by everyone. And I tell them, you can talk to one another. And you could brainstorm together. But remember one thing when you answer these questions. That if you do not think, if you do not take time to open your mind and not try to assume things, you will not get the questions right. Example. Mary and Jane were born of the same parents within 1 minute of one another. Yet they are not twins. How is that possible? If if I ask you to take a moment and think about it, the first thing you start thinking about is, okay, let me think about it. Was it a stepmother? Were they from a different time zone? Are they adopted? With two mothers in different rooms and the same father? Was the father, two fathers? And what you don't realize is that the answer is they're triplets. But because your mind immediately makes assumptions about what I'm saying, you will automatically respond accordingly. In good faith, thinking you're doing the right thing. When you disabuse yourself and the people you're speaking to about those assumptions, you get all of them. You get all of you, which is the quintessential way to get information and help people. There is a guy, and he is walking in a neighborhood on the left side of the street against the traffic. There are no street lights. There's no power in the neighborhood. He is wearing an all-black outfit with a ski mask. A car is coming at him, and its lights are out. However, at the last minute, the car swerves and avoids the man. How is that possible? Your mind tries to figure out what angle there is. The answer is, it's daylight. But you're not thinking that it's daylight. You're thinking if I'm talking about power outages and I'm talking about men in black masks and cars with lights out, I must be talking about night. Every human being does this. To be the best communicator, to be the best listener, to be the most successful person personally and professionally, you must disabuse yourself of that. I tell people, and I encourage you, one of the greatest tools to learn how to do this in a disciplined way is to go home today or go to lunch with someone or dinner with something and try to ask them questions where they don't give a one-word answer. And you must ask questions that come from their answer. So I can't say, did you have a good day? I can't even say, how was your day? Because they might say, fine. I have to say things like, please tell me the things you did today. Please tell me 2 or 3 things that happened to you today. When the person responds, well, I went to the supermarket and then I picked up the kids, my next question is going to be, tell me what you bought at the supermarket. And see how far you can go. You will not believe how quickly you fail. On the other hand, you will not believe how much information you will get from the other person. And I have done this in seminars with 10,000 people in a room and 10 people in a room. And in 100% of those seminars, when they come back that afternoon or they come back the next day, they all say, I didn't even know my husband. I didn't even know my wife. I wasn't even listening. Because they start telling you things that tell you what they're really thinking, what their mindset is, rather than the content. Really what's happening is the man is upset that he has to keep picking up the kids, or that he's upset that he has to take that route, and that is bleeding onto you, or that is framing why they're negative. So use that technique to practice, and what will happen is it will stop you from being assumptive and open your mind and say, what did they just say? Let me ask a question from that. That is why the exhaustion technique, the reiteration, reframing, the resource works, because I'm saying, what else besides what you said? If I say what else to you, it sure sounds like there must be more. Then if I say, how was your day? Or, did you do anything else? No, you lose. So try to go about doing that. And it will use a wonderful tool in your brain and in your conditioning to help get the information. Now you notice in your materials, it not only talks about photographic evidence, it gives you some of these samples of how to talk to people, how to ask questions in a way that will promote them. And remember, we're not just asking the questions, we're listening to the answers. So watch as I demonstrate an example of how I automate that thinking. We're now going to talk about photographs, or we're now going to, let's use correspondence. We're now going to talk about the letters you wrote. How many letters did you write? I wrote 3. Other than 3 letters, what else did you write in the form of written or email? One other. So if I understand correctly, you wrote 4 letters, 3 of which were written and 1 was which on a digitally formatted. Yes. What other letters did you write? I didn't write anything else of any kind. Who else has been involved in this claim? Or maybe you know that from the beginning. You say, you discussed that your husband was helping you. Did he write letters? How many letters did he write? Oh, he wrote 2 others. So now I have 3 letters from you, handwritten, 1 email, and 2 letters from him. What other letters were written? Okay, besides those letters, what other steps did you take of any kind? Or who else can help me to know? Or where are those letters? Where physically are they? Can I see those letters? When can I have those letters? If you see, I've taken those. Okay, now we've got the letters. Okay, let me start with the first letter. What caused you to write that letter? Not what's in the letter. What caused you to write that letter? Well, the insurance company called me and said blah, blah. Who at the insurance company? See how it's a tree? Okay, let's stop what I'm doing right now. Let's move over to that. Who at the insurance company? What'd you say? What'd they say to you? What'd they say to them? Then what'd you say? Then what'd they say? Then what'd you say? Okay, now let's go back to the branch, which is part of the tree. And what's happening is it teaches you to make sure you get all the information. And you will be really impressed and very confident because you will get all the information you need. And the materials give you some example of how to do that in a disciplined way. You also need to understand, beyond photographs, beyond correspondence, documents, things like that, I also want to know what else has been done in relation to this property. Generally speaking, in event-based, insurance-based types of recoveries, somebody would have been out to the property. You call FEMA, FEMA sends a representative out, and they do something. In the industry, we generally call those inspections, although they may be other events too, we generally start with the bigger shrimp net mentality of it's some sort of inspection. Somebody's coming out to inspect some aspect of your property in order to determine whether or not you should be provided money. I need to use the same tools to learn how many inspections were done, who the people were, and as to each inspection, what he said, what you said, what he said, what they said, what documents were created, each one of those documents. So as you see in each decision tree, if you will, in each forest of information, there are different trees, each of which have their own branches. So you're developing this mentality for each of those things, and your materials also provide you with those kinds of informational tools. You want to make sure, because we talked about earlier, when it comes to damages, that I have a written list of all the damages. Sometimes you will get partial lists. Sometimes, as we talked about earlier, somebody tells you that I have 2 suits, a toaster, and 2 computers, but it isn't written down anywhere. You may have reflected that in earlier documentation if you've used the techniques properly, but the reason why it is reiterated here is to help you to reframe you back. Okay, now I have a bunch of stuff, information I've gotten. Let's make sure now that based on that, no new items, no other things that have come up which are going to help in helping them, which are going to help in giving you information that will allow you to educate you, which are going to help in getting the most money, which are going to help in taking away the aggravation. Now that you've encompassed that, we can now start talking about how do we value what's been done. Okay, I got this bunch of stuff, lists. How do I put a dollar value on that? Has somebody else put a dollar value on that? Traditionally, in the industry, they use terms like estimates to gather or document the value of stuff. What you understand, what the insured understands as an estimate, is not what the insurance company understands as an estimate. The way I like to distinguish them, and there are a number of ways, is repair estimates versus field estimates. A repair estimate is more like your general contractor coming out and saying, this is how much it costs on one page to fix your property. A field estimate sounds like some professional went out in the field and followed some protocol to develop a more detailed valuation of each and every item that relates to that property. So when people hear the word estimate, you have to understand that you're going to need to go beyond that when you're trying to understand all the things that have been done. So you might get what they think are estimates from plumbers and electricians and general contractors and painters, bricklayers, everybody who's doing stuff for them. But that may not be the ultimate estimate for purposes of determining how much money they're entitled to receive. Now, most people in the industry understand that if you are an insured and you provide the right kind of documentation in a format and manner that the insurance company can best understand their coverage, they are more likely to pay you. There is less likely to be guessing. There is more likelihood to be some synergy between the people, insureds, experts, others, helping get money, and the people paying that money. So, it is very important that I understand what kind of ways were these damages reflected. So I want to ask that client, that prospect, that insured, that caller, the person I'm visiting with, how did you determine the damages? Who determined the damages? What kinds of documents said anything that had any kind of number on them? And you want to use the same sorts of techniques you used in the other categories. That exhaustion technique, that repetition reframing technique, that who else can tell me technique. You might find in the who else category that they say, you know what, you got to talk to my general contractor. He was out here with a bunch of subs. I don't know what he did. And you find out there's really 5 estimates. But the general contractor just holding on them because normally you wouldn't need them. You just need to know what it costs when you build your house. So getting that data is important. If I don't know already, which I probably should know from my prior questioning, I want to make sure I understand how much money they've already gotten. How much money they've already gotten, as you can readily understand, has a direct impact on how you can help them to get money. If they have a $100,000 insurance policy and they have gotten $99,700, but they are telling you how their life has over and it's been destroyed and their property is horrible and they have $196,000 of absolute documentable damages with 16 different estimates, they might be entitled to very little money. So how much they were paid is important. And from a person securing information, trying to empower them, the sooner in the time continuum that I am able to help that person, the less likely they would have received money. So therefore, as you progress in this gestation of doing this from day 1 to day 1,000, you will start to understand the tendencies for, okay, I'm likely to have been paid something if I'm in day 973 than if I'm in day 31. I'm likely to have not been paid something if I'm in day 1 or day 2 than I am in day 2000. So understanding that continuum also gives you good information, good intel to how you approach the educational, informational empowerment process. You will want also to make sure that along each of these patterns, as we have stated, we are constantly documenting what we are hearing. It is not just hearing the conversation, hearing about the picture. It is writing in a format. It is typing into a computer system. It is fitting into a form that information so that it can be utilized later. If you do not take the time to properly document that information, what you have done is not nearly as valuable to the next people in the food chain that are helping you. If you are doing something for an adjuster and you don't reflect all the phone conversations, you make the adjuster have to recontact them, perhaps under the fear of further embarrassment or being called incompetent, to secure that information again. If you do not get the insurance policies which you need, and somebody is calling now and trying to ask questions about the insurance policy and says, I need your insurance policies, and they say, why didn't you ask for them the 2 times before you called or met with me? You can imagine how you are disrupting that continuum of empowerment. So you want to make sure that you are constantly reflecting this data in the appropriate software or form-based document so that it can be leveraged in the way most helpful to the insured. Your materials, as you see, cover these sorts of things. Some notes about repairs. When people are making repairs, there are 2 things that are important that you need to principally understand at the start. Number 1, if people have made repairs, I want to preserve evidence of those repairs. I would like to have a piece of that wood. Maybe it can be tested later. Maybe the insurance company didn't get out there and see that piece of wood, either by negligence or intent, or through no fault. And I might want to make that available to them. If I have a part of a door, the stucco, the faucet that broke, the pipe, those sorts of things are really helpful to have as an additional source of review. And it eliminates the insurance company or any organization paying from claiming they don't know what that was. The second important thing about repairs is that you need to make sure that the insurance company or other organization is notified when you're making repairs. They need to understand that you are going to be fixing the home, taking out the walls, changing the windows, changing the toilets, redoing the piping, tearing up the floor and putting brand new floor down, and you need to make sure that they know in writing. So you're going to want to communicate to these individuals that you are effectuating repairs and we're giving you a chance to come out and look before, during, or after. And to take it even next level, you're giving an opportunity to tell you to use some other vendor that they like. So you want to examine that information so that either you can tell them that they should write and disclose, or you can send that information down that continuum to the experts who are going to write that for them. One last note that's sort of a corollary to this, and that is there are duties to mitigate. That means there is a duty for the person, if they have a hole in their window, to stop the moisture from coming in by putting up a piece of cardboard. a piece of wood, a new window, depending on what is necessary. What's important to remember, though, is the duty to mitigate is not the duty to reconstruct. So while insurance companies, other entities paying, may try to leverage that and delay so that you have to fix everything and then can try to seek recovery, being even more desperate, the duty to mitigate is more about protecting the property from further problem. And as experts will tell you, there's a balancing act that starts with aggressive documentation by the insured to them saying, fix my property, it is deteriorating by the day. I do not have $262,000 to put the new roof on. I do not have that money to do that. You need to help me immediately, and you need to get that adjuster out there as soon as possible. The most I can do is put a tarp over it. The best I can do is X. The experts will help you to do this, but it's important if you understand that you know that this sort of understanding will help the consumer, the insured, to do the best thing that they can do under the circumstances. Now, what we have done is we have set out the landscape for how these claims work, what the personalities of the people are, how these claims are likely to be processed, what kind of information you need to know in order to ask the right questions, what physically you need to do with the person calling, you're meeting with, emailing, Skyping with, to properly ascertain, collect, coalesce, organize all of the data that is necessary to formulate a resolution that would be helpful to them. And you have learned about the physical things that insureds, owners, other people need to do in order to maximize their claim by protecting their property or otherwise notifying the insurance company. In other training, you have learned the physical definitions of things, what flood coverage is, what homeowners is, what coverage A means, what the mechanical aspects, the rules of the game are, so that now you're able to capture the information in a way that is most productive not only for you, but for them, that makes them feel empowered, that does what I have told you is so important, that these people who come into a room or are talking to you on the phone that are angry and frustrated and aggravated and despondent are now empowered to the point of giving a standing ovation. When you conclude the discussion that you're making, it is never truly an end. As the cliche goes, it's not goodbye, it's when I see you next. In the next section, we'll talk about specifically flood policies, homeowners policies, some of the specifics that you might want to focus on or to educate the insured on to further leverage and maximize their claim.
My name is David Charles. I've been a claims professional for 35 years. I worked for FEMA for 3 years. My entire professional life has been devoted to disaster relief work. I've never had a local staff job. I always went out on storms whenever they occurred. Everything from Hurricane Andrew, the Northridge quake, to even up here on the World Trade Center. That's been my life, is working in catastrophe environments and disaster relief. First thing I'm going to talk about is techniques in taking photos. I have a particular method that I call the 1, 2, 3 method. If you're going to take a photo, you want first an overview of the room. You have to identify the room, that whatever object, if it's a contents item or personal property, or if it's damage in that room, you have to identify that room with an overview. The next picture in your sequence, especially if you're doing digital, you want them to go in sequence so you don't have to sort them out later, because all walls look alike and you can't figure out which was which when you get into a house. An overview of the item that you're claiming for damage. If it's that chair, a long picture of the chair that just shows what it is without a whole lot of worry about showing the damage. The third of the 1, 2, 3 is a close-up of the damage to the item. So I've got an overview of this room, I've got an overview of that chair, and I've got a close-up of the damage to the chair. 1, 2, 3 method. Do it in every single thing that you take pictures of. In the digital age, there's no reason not to take a lot of pictures. Take them on the highest resolution that you can. We'll edit it down later, but you need that kind of resolution to blow it up. There might be something in there that we want to blow up better. Now, always start with an overview of the room, and if you can, get a close-up of a serial number on any appliance or item that's probably going to be thrown away. You've got to get serial numbers for a flood claim to start with, model numbers and serial numbers. Get in close and get a picture of it. So very important to do this stuff. Another very important photograph to take, to advise our clients and our potential clients to take, is you need to establish the water level if it's a flood claim. And every adjuster does this. They will take a tape measure and hold it straight down the wall, and they'll see it'll be clear that there's a water line on that wall at 3 feet 6 inches. Very important in every flood claim to establish what the high water mark was in that area. And these are the kind of photos that the homeowners can take. You have to prompt them if they don't have a tape measure. Most people will, but you know, it could have been flooded out. But if the ideal situation, and what we do on every inspection, is we go to the highest water level and we photograph a tape measure standing up beside it to show how high the water was in that room. And be disciplined. Don't go randomly through your house, taking a picture in this room and then a picture in that room. Go one room at a time, one item at a time. Take more pictures than you ever imagined you would ever need, and we won't use the ones that you don't need. We'll use the ones that establish the damage. Now, if you have a video camera, if you're doing something like that, the most common problem I see with folks taking home movies, even if it's just for pleasure, is they pan too fast. They move the camera way too quickly. Go to a center point in the room and a very super slow pan all the way around the room. If you're going to do it, that's the most effective way to help us and to document your claim later. Everybody's seen a home movie where people are just moving their hands around and you can't even watch it, and it doesn't tell you anything as far as evidence of a claim. Over and over throughout the presentation, Scott has talked about why we're documenting this so carefully, why we're looking for all these detailed answers. And a common thing, people might feel like we're just beating them to death. Why do we really need all this stuff? The most important thing that we can do, and it'll help later, is establish a timeline. Establish a timeline and make sure that the homeowner knows what establishing a timeline means. If they don't get that, say, I want you to learn how to journal. I want you to write down every single contact that you have with these folks. It doesn't become obvious until you get farther into it, and they're always surprised at how many times they've contacted, left messages, and nobody returned the call. That helps so much when you get to appraisal, so much when you get to your final negotiations. It's essential to create a timeline and to stress over and over to them. And Scott mentioned several things throughout his presentation where, oh, we've got to ask him for this, we've got to ask him for that, in anticipation that there would be pushback. There will be pushback, but if you start up front, say, we are establishing a timeline that will be essential in working your claim, getting you the most money that you've got coming to you, and taking all this aggravation off of your back. So I would add that to the timeline section. A flood claim is different than any other claim in the insurance world. First of all, it's barely an insurance policy. It's actually a piece of legislation that establishes some kind of payment to homeowners or business owners that live in areas that commonly flood. The carriers won't write flood insurance. It's a bad risk. They can spread the risk all over the country on a fire policy because everybody has nearly the same potential to have a fire. But people who get flooded live near water. So it's there's no way insurance companies will write that without a subsidy. And in this regard, there are a number of very odd things to an insurance professional about the flood policy. And many people don't write or don't do flood claims because they just don't understand it. There's more paperwork. Adjusters generally don't understand flood. Even the veterans are always having to go back to refer to a number of different documents that they give you when you get your flood certification that they never use any other time, and they're counterintuitive to any other aspect of claims processing. So after you've determined that they've got coverage, I want to know, number one, is the building elevated? And elevated is a term in the flood policy that doesn't mean what it might mean to a homeowner or a layman. Elevated means raised off of the ground on anything other than a slab on grade construction. If it's a crawl space that's 1 foot high, that's an elevated building. And that's a very special category in the world of flood claims. And you'll have to describe this to them. When you say elevated, they won't know what you mean. You're going to have to, the best thing I can think of to make people understand it is there a crawl space or is it a slab on grade? Most people understand those two terms. Get an understanding of, is there a crawl space in that property, and make sure that that they understand what you're asking for. Now, going back to photos, the water level on the ground floor. We need to establish what is the water level on the ground floor. Now, if it's an elevated building up on piers, they might think what you mean the ground floor is the bottom where it may be dirt or maybe a concrete pad with steps going up to the second. You got to establish what they're talking about. The first finished floor is what we need. The first finished floor, the water level from the floor. And again, to get that, if they haven't already done it, get a photograph of that water line with a tape measure beside it and be able to establish where that is, not just a picture of a wall that could be anywhere. All the evidence starts to degrade after these events. They'll end up washing those water lines off. Get a quick picture of that water line and establishing what it was is very important. Now, the next question I want to know, is this your primary dwelling? Is it that would only apply in a single family residence case because those are the ones that are eligible for replacement cost. A lot of little odd quirks to the flood policy. Next, have you had any structural damage? That triggers a whole different response from us when we're prosecuting the claim. Now we know we're going to have engineers. If they don't have structural damage, it's going to be a smaller claim and easier to process. If they do have structural damage, we're going to have to throw more resources at it to try to figure out how to help them. Next, have you had a prior flood claim? And if you have, I want the details. A lot of people will have had a claim from last year's storm. Probably a lot less damage, but something certainly. And if they did make the claim, we need to know the date of loss, what their payout was, and have you done the repairs that were paid for? Essential that we find out if they've done the repairs that were paid for because they're not going to be paid for it twice. They got paid for their hardwood flooring on the first floor the first time and they haven't replaced it, they just sanded it or they did a lesser version of the total replacement or whatever they were allowed. You're going to have to know that in order to make your next claim. So get them going on that, and that's part of the paperwork that you're going to need in every case. An ICC claim is increased cost of compliance. That's a claim in which the federal government makes available to folks extra monies on top of the face value of the policy to either raise the building up or to move it to another site entirely. And it comes into play when they have substantial damage. And again, that's a term relative to this policy. Substantial damage is 50% or more of the value of the property. And it could even be within a 10-year period if they had multiple events. So an ICC claim is how it's commonly known, increased cost of compliance. And it's offered to flood victims over and above what they normally have. So the last thing I want to stress is if you've started throwing away your items, let's go back to our photo talk, get detailed photos, more than you imagine you'll ever need. Get serial numbers and model numbers on every single appliance. Anything that has a serial or model number, not a hairdryer, but a television set on up. You've got to have this stuff or the National Flood Program will not pay you. And they'll tell you, and they get away with that. So get videos, get photos, document the serial and model numbers on your dishwasher, your washer dryer. They're hard to find. A range top you have to lift up. You have to look for these things. Don't throw it away until you've got this material or you won't be able to prove your case. Okay, more on the elevated buildings. There is limited coverage for areas and flood hazard zones that are elevated. And this didn't come about because of crawl space construction that we see so much of here. This restriction to the coverage in a flood policy came about because of so many coastal areas that are up on piers. They're elevated maybe 10 feet and with a stairway going to the top. Maybe they'll have a utility room on the bottom floor with a washer, dryer, water heater. That's a common method of construction in coastal areas up and down the East Coast and everywhere really. So that's the genesis of the elevated building restrictions. And a lot of times adjusters, flood adjusters who aren't properly trained, they don't understand this stuff. They're not working flood claims, so they might misclassify you as elevated or not elevated. There are a number of things that aren't covered in elevated buildings that would be covered if it wasn't classified an elevated building. So it's very important to get to know if you're on a crawl space or if it's pushed up there. That's what they're talking about when they bring in all these restrictions of coverage. Another item that's restricted in coverage on the National Flood Policy is basements. Finished areas in a basement are not covered. A lot of things in a basement are not covered, but it's again a very common thing for people to miss things that they could be paying for in those areas. But in general, they're going to try to restrict your coverage on a basement to just foundation elements, utility connections, sump pumps, gas tanks, a lot of different things like that that are not finished surfaces. If you build a man cave in a basement, most of it will not be covered. And another thing that comes to mind is the use of the word flood. In layman's terms, you hear people say all the time, well, my upstairs was flooded. A pipe burst and it flooded the upstairs. Well, that's the way that we all talk, but in the insurance world, it's not the same thing. A flood is a rising water event where water comes up on two adjacent properties. That's the definition. It has to be on two adjacent properties at least, rising up from the ground, not coming through a pipe from above, even though a common use of the word flood might be, my upstairs was flooded. It's not the same in the insurance world. And because of the flood policy is such a difficult risk for a carrier to write, there are a number of restrictions to it. The coverage is not anywhere close to as good as even the worst homeowner's policy for wind and fire. So you're going to find out, you're going to get a cruel education in a lot of ways to what flood covers and doesn't cover through this event. If it wasn't for the federal government, nobody would write it. You can get excess insurance. It's pretty expensive, but the people with expensive homes up and down the coastline learned from Katrina that they better do it. And when Katrina occurred, the limit was $250,000 for a single-family dwelling or any resident, and you'd have $1 million home that was washed off of its foundation and gone. So they have a $750,000 shortfall. Concurrent causation laws were the biggest problem in Katrina, and it's going to be the same way here. So we're going to have a lot of engineers working on proving that the wind damaged these buildings before the floodwater got to them. And that's going to be a difficult claim to win, and you're going to have the expertise of guys like Scott and our team putting together a claims package to move it in that direction. They're instantly going to deny you. They're going to say it's all flood if you're underinsured on flood, and the homeowner's going to probably try to duck everything that he can. Just say, no, the flood caused all of this. It's not the case. There was a massive amount of wind, 70-mile-an-hour sustained winds with 100-mile-an-hour gusts, very far inland on this storm, and that's enough to exceed the rated capacity of a lot of the structural elements of these buildings. If a window is rated for 50-mile-an-hour wind and it's a 100-mile-an-hour wind, it may still be in the building, but it's not the same window. It's a common example I like to use on this, is if you got hit in the mouth with a fist and it knocked a tooth out, it's gone. They're going to replace it. The homeowner's insurance, using that analogy, will replace that missing element. But your other teeth might be very loose. A much lesser blow could knock them out instantly, although they don't show it. The same thing is true with windows. A window shakes and rattles to such a degree, it oscillates, that it comes loose. And it may still be there, but it's not the same window that it was 1 minute before this storm occurred. It needs to be indemnified. It needs to be replaced. It's served its useful job. It saved you that one time. It won't do it again. Or it'll fail at a much lesser load. It's not the same window that it was, and we believe that we can prove that you're owed that, but there will never be an insurance company who will send an engineer out there to do that unless they're made to. And the engineers they send are just to rebut our engineers. They're not going out there with the attitude of, oh, I want to see what really happened here, can I help you? They're going out to say, nope, there's nothing wrong with that window, and you're just claiming something that's not real.